I'm Yulia, the voice of the podcast Love to Heal, a journey of self-discovery, healing, and spiritual growth. Welcome to today's episode, Through the Eyes of a Child. As I watch my kids grow, I often wish I could see the world through their eyes. Just imagine a world of curiosity and unconditional love. Imagine the absence of fear, judgment, resentment, and embarrassment. People say that you can see a person's soul through their eyes, and if you look into a child's eyes, you can sense the purity and innocence of this child. Of course, many souls are old and carry with them suffering and many lessons, but when a person is a child, especially under the age of 3, I would say, he or she has a beginner's mind that hasn't been conditioned by society. And that's what makes the child so pure and innocent. For example, when I watch my 6-year-old tell my toddler that he doesn't want to play with her or to leave him alone, and my son can be quite rude to my daughter at times, my daughter never takes it personally. She just walks away and starts playing on her own or changes the subject completely. She doesn't get mad. She doesn't come back with something mean to say. She just goes about her business and tries again later. Adults, on the other hand, and I'm thinking of myself and what I would have done naturally prior to my spiritual awakening, if someone were to tell me to leave them alone and not want to spend time with me, my conditioned ego would have gotten very hurt. I would have probably walked away teary-eyed, thinking, what is it that I had done wrong to merit this treatment? I would have thought about the incident time and time again until it probably gave me a headache. And it would have been probably awkward to see the person again later on. Now I know better to not react this way because I've been learning for years to accept any and all situations with unconditional love, react with my soul instead of my ego, but it's still not natural, not the way it is for young kids, right? To just react with love, with unconditional love. We're still human, and no matter how much you work at it, I know in my case, yes, I work on not getting upset and not getting mad, but still, for an instance, I will absolutely feel some hurt before reminding myself not to react with my ego, but rather with my soul. Another example of how kids are so pure. Take, for instance, the kid's ability to see beauty in everything. Now that it's spring, my kids keep bringing me dandelions because they see yellow flowers and think, this is beautiful, Mom will love it. And I do love it. But what does my conditioned mind think when I see these yellow flowers? It thinks weeds, right? Weeds that must be killed and be gone from our lawn. And it wasn't always like that. I grew up in Russia where dandelions are not considered weeds. I remember as a kid playing with them, making head wreaths out of them and seeing huge lawns across the city covered in yellow flowers. It was really beautiful. And then, of course, once the flowers turned into the fuzzy seeds, that was the most fun part, to blow on them and watch the wind carry the fluff off. It wasn't until I moved to the States and became a house owner that my perception of the dandelion changed drastically. And it makes me somewhat sad that instead of seeing beauty in the flower, which is part of nature that God created, instead I'm seeing a nuisance that I must kill every spring and summer because either the city demands it or the neighbors would complain. Something else that we can learn from children that I personally blocked out as I grew up is the ability to say what we feel and think. Yes, kids can be brutal sometimes with their frank comments, but they tell it like it is with no reservations, which many people are afraid to do as not to hurt the feelings of others or to avoid conflict or to avoid judgment. I think it's important to be tactful and find a middle ground between having no filter and staying quiet completely and treated like a doormat. I know in my case, being a people pleaser all my life, I'm just now starting to express my opinions without fear of being misunderstood or judged and making decisions based on what's best for my higher self, rather than worrying about what others might say, or if because of what I say, some people might not want to be friends with me anymore. Something else that we might look to kids for inspiration is the unconditionality of their love. In their case, usually towards parents, but also it can be towards strangers, towards everybody really. In a mundane type of situation, I may go several days without taking a shower, doing my hair, right? I can be a complete mess, and my kids will still want to cuddle with me and tell me how beautiful I am and how much they love me. This is because they see past the flaws, past the physical. They love with their soul. And this is what we're missing as adults, when love all of a sudden begins to depend on something earthly, like money, looks, and status. Once again, I'm not suggesting we dismiss the physical aspects of our life completely, but we should learn to perceive the world more with our soul rather than the ego, the conditioned mind. Similarly, children, they innately trust the world around them. They're not afraid to explore, to stumble, to fall. They trust there's a safety net around them. And even if they fall, life will go on, except that they will have learned a lesson. They will have learned from that fall, and they will have grown up. This safety net is something else that we lose sight of as we mature. Learning to trust God, the universe, is a great feat for many. We may be afraid to leave our job that we're not happy in because of fear of not finding another. We may be scared to terminate a relationship because of fear of being alone, and so on. But what I'm learning and trying to share with my audience, with you, is that we must trust that God wants the best for us, first of all. And if we can trust God, then we can take that leap of faith and be sure that someone will catch us. We just need to work on developing a trust in the process, as Louise Hay puts it in her book, The Process of Life, or trusting the universe, trusting God, however you want to put it. But it's good to take these leaps of faith. It's good to risk. It's good sometimes to live a little bit on the edge if you believe that there is that safety net around you. Something else that I want to bring up is that kids also don't doubt that they're loved. We as adults tend to forget that we're loved by God Himself. And this is where most problems stem from. Even if we don't have a good relationship, let's say with our parents, or we don't have a good relationship with a partner, we must remember that no matter what, we are still loved by the most important force, which is our Creator. And divine love is endless. It's abundant. So even if you don't have a relationship with your parents at all, even if you don't have a husband or wife to love you every single day, you can still grow love in your soul by understanding and accepting that you're loved by God Himself. This is very important to get through our brain because once we feel loved, then we will feel secure, and then we will feel safe, and then we will be able to take on life with a lot more energy, health, and happiness. Different religions address the topic of being childlike as well. For instance, in the New Testament, Jesus says, quote, "Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." End quote. What this means is that when we try to be like children, unassuming, trusting, and loving, curious and eager to learn, this gives our parent, God, a chance to guide us through our lives. When we're like children, we go with the flow. We don't fight the current. We trust that our parent wants the best for us and will take care of us. We may not understand with our earthly limited mind why certain things happen in our life, but just like you wouldn't expect a 1-year-old child to understand why some unknown person in a white lab coat is sticking a needle in him or her, similarly, God can't explain to us why some events occur in our destiny because we simply don't have the bandwidth to comprehend what happens at the soul level, or in past and future lives, or different dimensions. Also, I should mention that while in the West, enlightenment is often understood as an age of reasoning and reckoning with serious matters in serious ways, in Eastern philosophy, enlightenment is very much connected to our inner child, which harbors the wisdom of our natural selves, the honest facing of what brings us joy and what makes us suffer. To think like a child is to have a mind that is open and untainted, and neither overly complicated nor distanced from existence by a systematic view of life, writes one scholar of Eastern philosophies. In this sense, to be childlike is not the same as being childish. There's a Japanese Zen term, shoshin, which means something along the lines of beginner's mind. And this term refers to a paradox. The more you know about a subject, the more likely you are to close your mind to further learning. As the Zen monk Shunryu Suzuki, hopefully I pronounced that somewhat correctly, put it in his book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. In Judaism, too, a child's qualities are deemed important in the development of one's faith. The great Talmudic authority, Rabbi Isaac ben Sheshet, proudly publicizes that he prays from a child's perspective. Theologians and philosophers can discuss God's immanence, transcendence, and perhaps His essence. Yet it takes an innocent child to appreciate God's essential simplicity. Einstein once said, quote, "God always takes the simplest way." And a child knows that way. At the most mature level, one serves God with the innocent maturity of a child. Another point of interest is how kids are happy with so little. As we mature, we become more materialistic. The more stuff we own, the better it makes us feel. Well, the ego feels better, not so much the soul. If you're a parent, you'll understand this. All that a baby or even toddler really needs is parental love and food. Their incredible imagination will take care of the rest. They don't need fancy toys and gadgets. When we buy them toys, they play with them for a few minutes, hours if we're lucky, and then they forget about them. But an empty box, sometimes, that'll provide days of fun. The point here is that naturally, we don't need a lot to be happy. As long as we have food on our table, a safe place to sleep, and take care of our family, this is really all that a human needs. The rest is extra. And what happens is sometimes we get caught up in the extra. And what happens when we get caught up in the extra is that we forget about the essential. We forget about what is really needed for our soul in the first place. And then we become materialistic, and some people forget about the soul completely. Look at monks, both in Christianity and Buddhism. They don't have any possessions really, at all. They live in the simplest of ways, because this is the fastest way to enlightenment. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, it's not necessary for us all to become monks, because that would mean the end of the human race pretty much, since we wouldn't have kids and no one would work, etc. But something that can serve as a reminder is that we don't need a lot of stuff to be happy. After all, we can't take all that stuff with us into the next life. When my spiritual awakening began, I started losing interest in some things like shopping, makeup, and even entertainment. Each time I felt more and more content with being alone by myself in my house on my yoga mat. I'm still a sucker for travel, don't get me wrong, but I've become more of a homebody, if you will. I don't feel the need to constantly go out, be in company of others, and much less to acquire stuff. On the contrary, I'd love to become a minimalist. But not possible because my husband loves to collect all kinds of antiques and things he finds anywhere and everywhere. So, if you feel that you've been suppressing your child self and would like to bring forth that part of you, here are some tips. Number 1, spend time around children. If you don't have any running around your house, like mine, you can just go to a park or another public place and observe them. Try not to look creepy while doing it, but just observe how the kids play, letting yourself become lost in their world. If you have kids in your life, talk to them, ask them questions, or play with them. And when you do, instead of bringing them into your world and a way of seeing things, let them bring you into theirs. Number 2, be in the present moment. This is something kids do naturally. They just focus on one thing and they're not preoccupied with yesterday or tomorrow. As a result of being immersed in the present moment, they're able to experience the full impact of life. Reminisce about your childhood. Remember the happiest moments. I know for me, some of my fondest memories include spending time with my grandparents, decorating our house for New Year's, and playing with my neighbors. Try to remember not only pictures, but sounds, smells, and feelings. If you can't remember a happy moment, imagine one. Number 4, write a letter to your inner child, offering support and compassion. write words you would have wished to hear. Whichever hand is dominant, use the other one to draw pictures. This non-dominant hand technique is explored in the book called The Creative Journal by Lucia Capaccione. And it helps, this technique, it helps release feelings, explore dreams, and solve problems. Finally, a very important piece of advice to go about your life more easily and reduce drastically your feelings of frustration, anger, and irritation with people in your life is this. See every person as a child they once were. You start to feel angry, let's say, at your boss. Imagine your boss as an infant. Picture those chubby cheeks and hands. Sense his or her defenselessness and innocence. Do you still want to say nasty things to your boss? Maybe not, maybe less. Try this exercise with any person that's causing you distress. It's a quick way to lower your aggression, which of course is extremely important in spiritual awakening, because then it becomes easier to accept any and all circumstances as God's will, saving thus our health, wealth, and well-being. And to conclude today's episode, I will recite a poem written by Henry Vaughan. He's a Welsh metaphysical poet from the 17th century. This poem, titled The Retreat, is a meditation on childhood. It is about the loss of heavenly innocence experienced during childhood and a desire to regain this lost state of angel infancy. So enjoy this poem. Please remember to follow me on Instagram and to subscribe to the Love to Heal podcast so that you know every time I post a new episode. Until next time, happy those early days when I shined in my angel infancy, before I understood this place appointed for my second race, or taught my soul to fancy aught but a white celestial thought, when yet I had not walked above a mile or two from my first love, and looking back at that short space, could see a glimpse of his bright face. When on some gilded cloud or flower my gazing soul would dwell an hour, and in those weaker glories spy some shadows of eternity